was always like, hey, like you gotta work your mind. But I'm like, okay, like I never really I never really even questioned it though. Like, being like, oh, but how do I do that? It was more so like, oh, I just need to be better. I just need to be better. You know what I mean? But it was like, how does that happen though, right?
And we're back. Welcome to Rise and Shine, the podcast where we dive deep in learning more about athletes' stories and those connected to athletes and mindset. Today on the podcast, we have Eloise. She is a professional softball player, played on the national team in France, and right now is competing at the national level in Europe. I'm so excited for you to learn more about Eloise's journey through being both an individual sport and a team sport athlete. Let's jump in. Hi, Eloise. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start off by learning and having the listeners learn a little bit more about you. Can you talk a little bit about where you grew up?
Yeah, of course. Well, I grew up in France. I'm from France, so I was in France for the 18 first years of my life until I was 18. Then I moved to Quebec actually for a year because I always wanted to play college softball in the States. So I moved to Quebec, which was kind of like an easier step for me because nobody knew me being from France essentially. So I went through the whole like recruiting process by myself in Quebec, and then I moved to the States. So I played 2 years in Florida and then 2 years at Marshall University in West Virginia. And once I graduated, I kind of, I kept playing softball, went back to Europe for a little bit, and then I just moved to Vancouver for completing my master's in kinesiology.
Very cool. Can you talk a little bit about, so you grew up in France. Was softball the first sport that you started playing, or did you try out a bunch of different sports before landing?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty funny because I did not start playing softball until I was older. I actually the first sport I did was rhythmical gymnastics. So that's yeah, I know that's like kind
Wow.
of a bit interesting, yeah. But it's not something that I did like 1 year and like, oh, I just tried it out. No. I started when I was 4 and I did it until I was 15, I think. So it was
Wow.
like quite like I kind of competed like national level and all of that. We had a pretty good team. It was a lot of fun. But then I started playing baseball when I was about 8 or 9. So for a bunch of years, being a teen, I kind of did both sports. We were pretty like opposite. So that was kind of funny to just like try to like juggle both of them.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about rhythmic gymnastics. I don't know much about it. Like, how did you get into that, and what did that training look like compared to softball?
Yeah, so I don't really know. I think like my cousin tried out for like and my cousin's like way older than me, and she tried it out for like I don't know, like a couple years. I don't really know. I just remember like going to a competition or like something she was doing. Like I don't even remember. I was 4, so and I kind of like I don't know. I was like I want to do that. I think so. I just got into it and then just like grew up doing it. Obviously when you're a kid like you just do like some like basic stuff, but yeah, then training it was just we were starting to like get like pretty good, so we would I don't know like practice like maybe like from what I remember maybe like 4 times a week or something, 5 times a week, I don't really know. We had like quite a few practices a week, and then I had to like practice baseball as well. So sometimes I would literally have baseball in the afternoon and then go to rhythmical gymnastics like later on. So I have to like go home, shower, change entirely, and like it would be like a completely different word. Yeah.
Right, like completely different uniform. And rhythmic gymnastics is more of an individual sport, right? Or do you
Um,
compete on
yeah,
teams?
yeah, you have both. So we were on team, you can compete like individually or have like a team. And when you're, it's that's what I think, and I love like the team atmosphere. And I think like by now I kind of figure out that I like team sports more than individual. Now that I've tried like a bunch, but It's just like I like having the team and having like other people on the team, and you can like count on them and all of that, just like by yourself doing the performance. You're like all together and you can rely on each other and stuff. So I remember I would be extremely stressed because it's like it's different than softball. You're all like on this, like, I don't even know how you call it in English, but like this, um I don't know, like carpet or whatever
Yeah,
it
like
is. I
the
don't know the proper word like in English, because obviously I grew up like doing it in France. Um, and you're like doing your performance like on there, and you have judges like looking at you, like sitting there looking at you, everything's silence, and then the music started and you do your whole thing, right? And
yeah.
when you by yourself, you're like, oh God, everybody's looking at me. It's kind of stressful, but as a team, at least you have each other. So
Talk a little bit. I'm really interested because you both did like, so yes, there's the team aspect of rhythmic gymnastics, but
yeah.
you also, it's like mainly, right, individual sport. It's that what you just said, people are looking at you. And then softball is the team sport. Did you find that there was a difference in your mindset going into a performance in rhythmic gymnastics versus going into a game for softball?
Um, yes and no. I know that when I was younger, anyways, like when I played baseball and softball later on, I would be like really stressed, like starting the game, and especially at bat, because once again, when you're batting and you're facing the pitcher, like it's you versus the pitcher, right? Like nobody can help you. You kind of like there, same thing, everybody's looking at you, you know what I mean? So that is a bit more stressful, but when I was in defense, I would be a bit more relaxed, from what I remember anyways. And that is a bit the same, like when I was doing rhythmical gymnastics, I remember just being like really stressed before the performance, because you're like building up, you're like, oh, like there's like five more, four more, three, like counting down until like you get to be there, so you know exactly what's happening, and just like the pressure is building up right once you get there. And obviously at that time, like we didn't have like any like mental preparation or anything, so I guess I also didn't really know exactly how to handle it. I think I did like the best I could, but you could tell like sometimes I would be like, we were all like a bit tense and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that with swimming. Like when I was a kid, it was that individual sport. Like you have your team, but you're getting up to the block. And I do wish that I had some more tools to work on my mind. I don't know if you feel the same in that way.
Oh
Back
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, especially yeah, growing up playing baseball, I know that was kind of like something I was missing. But it's until you're taught how to do it, right?
right.
It's just you cannot. It's hard to figure it out by yourself, anyways.
Yeah, definitely. Was there a point in your career? So like, let's shift over to softball. And do you call it in France? Is it all baseball? No
Yeah,
matter
yeah,
if,
baseball, softball, yeah. We
yeah,
call it, yes, yeah.
both. Yeah. When was the point where you started learning about your mind, and learning about how important that was in the game?
Yeah, I remember when I was I'm trying to like just think, because like everything was a blur.
Yeah, right.
Like from that age, just like,
Yes.
okay, when did I start? But I think when I want to say about 15 or so, maybe like a little bit younger, but like about that age. I remember like one of my friend who was also while I was playing with her on the women's team, my club team, but she was also coaching me, because I was under like 18, so she was coaching that team. And I remember her like telling me that I was a good player, but to be a great player, like the difference is gonna be in your head, right? So, and there was like kind of like always that like coming back. And I remember I would be really any time I would like make an error and stuff, it would be really hard to recover. I would be so mad. I would be like just like just anger like building up, and like frustration. It was so hard to like overcome that, like, anyways. And I know that comes, it gets better as you grow up and you learn more about the game and all of that. But I just remember being like overly frustrated, like a lot of the times, and that would be something that would come up, and I was like, yeah, like, how you have to work your mind kind of thing. But nobody ever like actually gave me some tools to do it. It'll be like, hey, like when this happens, maybe you should do this, or like when that happened, like maybe you should do this instead of whatever, right? It was always like, hey, like you got to work your mind. But I'm like, okay, like I never really quite, I never really even questioned it though, like being like, oh, but how do I do that? It was more so like, oh, I just need to be better. I just need to be better. You know what I mean? But it was like, how does that happen though, right? So
Right.
that was, yeah.
It's like you can say something like, oh, you like you have to do this, and then it's like, okay, but what you just said, how do I do
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. How
So
do I do? Yeah.
did you find that when you went to college, that was something that was focused on and you learned the how? Or was it still you were kind of figuring it out as you went?
hmm well, basically, when I went to college, I actually played JUCO first, in Florida. So when I went there, first of all, it was a big change, right? Because I was like moving from France to Quebec and then to Florida, and I had to like speak English all the time. So it was just like a lot of going on, but it wasn't a thing that was like talked about tons. So, and I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't really struggling at that way, at that level. So everything was still pretty smooth. I would say, like overall, it was okay, except for the fact that they switched my batting side. So I was batting righty, and when I got there, because I was pretty fast, they were like, "Oh, we're gonna, maybe we can try to, try to be a slapper," and I was like, "Sure, like that sounds fun." But until you start struggling, because obviously you're not not super good at it when you start, and it's a bit frustrating. But it was never something that was really like talked about, or at least we did not like purposely focus on it or practice it and stuff. But when I went to Marshall, that's where really when it started. And we actually practiced. So our coach had like like sheets with like goals, and you had to write down everything, and like, how do I do this and how do I do that, and like what's gonna help me, blah blah blah, all of that. And that was almost overwhelming, because it was like the first time that I had like experienced that. And for me to like like change, like playing a level, first of all, right, going from JUCO to D1 was already a bit of a change. And then he's like, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And, and learning about it at the same time. Anyways, I found it like a little bit overwhelming. So I kind of wish I had that before, and I had like time to practice it, and it would have been just like a natural at that level, instead of like, oh, I'm starting to work on my mental game when I'm probably have other stuff to, like focus on. So
Like you're already going through that transition of going to a new school, going to a new state, moving away from where you grew up. And then it's like, okay, here's this whole thing, and like change your mindset now,
yeah.
work on your, so I can imagine how tough that is. And I think you bring up a great point where you say like, I do wish I had this younger,
Mhm.
because it's not an overnight fix. And it's like, I'm still working on my mindset too. And I'm not competing right now.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm competing in random things, but not like, not swimming, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I want to jump into, so you were on the French national team, or still are.
yeah.
Talk a little bit about that experience.
So I mean, playing for the national team is always like it's so rewarding, and it's also like so much fun. It's so different because I mean, to me anyways, because you're playing for your country, and when you get to the competition, it's like everybody else is like on a different team that is like literally a different country, right? I think there's a little bit more at stake, and also the fact that we literally just go for a tournament that is a week, right? So we have like maybe a week preparation before, and then we have the tournament. But that happens usually every 2 years. Anyways, in the past it's been every 2 years. So you can imagine how you prepare for those 2 years, and maybe you have other things going on in between. But it's not happening like college softball that you play like every weekend for the season, right? And then you got to play another season and another one, right? Here it's more so like you have to get ready for this week of competition, and you cannot recover from it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's one game you're gonna have to win, like you're gonna have to win it. If you don't, like you're probably not gonna be able to recover and get back in like the top 6 or 4, whatever it is, right? Whereas in college, you have a bit more, I would say, I mean, because the season is so long, you play so many games, right? If you lose once, probably not going to be the end of the world. As long as you recover from it, you have a bit more time to recover. But yeah, in that sense, it's a bit more intense. I would say like that's the one thing. It's like way more intense because like it's everything. It's a week of competing. You have like 1 or 2 games a day for a week straight, and you have to give it all, right? And you play for your country, you play with like people that know exactly where you're coming from, and like what's behind like the jersey and everything. And so it's pretty cool, and we've been playing together for a while, so it's always good to see like the team progress and see like new people coming in as well. So yeah.
So you all come from like different places, and then that week before is when you train together to then go into competition, right?
Yeah, so essentially they have like some like recruiting camps, like a few before we get together, but that's usually, they start working on some things, but they're still like recruiting people. So you don't have the full, like for sure, like like the full team that's gonna be at the tournament. So it's still a bit different, but I would say, yeah, usually sometimes we have other like smaller tournament before, like we're gonna go play in Italy, we're gonna go play in Spain against like local teams or whatever. But this year we're only gathering in Spain for a week before the tournament starts. But thankfully it's mostly the same team as last year. So it's gotta be, yeah, it should be okay to like see everybody, and we're pretty used to playing together. So
Yeah, no, definitely. Talk a little bit, and I know this is something that you're passionate about and like to focus on, preparing for competition. So this one's a little bit different because, right, you have that only a week, but
yeah.
in general, how do you prepare for competition?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because in my experience anyways, I know I feel the best like mentally, and I feel the most prepared when I'm physically and mentally prepared. So I know like if I if my preparation made sense and everything, I did everything I could, right? Like coming up to the competition, then I know I'm gonna feel ready, and I'm gonna be good to go. But let's say you did not prepare as much as maybe you should have, and you get to the competition, you're starting to think like, oh man, I should have gone to the gym, I should have done this, I should have done that, right? Then that's when, but you cannot change anything at that point. Like you cannot change anything. But I think that if you have that beforehand, at least you have the confidence that you've done everything you could, and now it's just like, okay, I just have to make some adjustment as it goes, right?
Yeah.
But at least you get there and you're like, okay, I did everything I could, I'm ready to go, like let's go compete, right? Whereas like having regret and starting to like overthink about things.
Yeah. So how do you find, has there been competitions where you've had that regret of, oh, I should have done this, I should have done this?
Not really, honestly, because I usually prepare like as much as I can. The only thing is, well, I used to be, playing in college, so I would like go back to Europe, and I would have had like this whole season of like competing essentially. And I'd go back to Europe and compete, and I've had like so much practice, and I'm ready. The last I would say like couple year, like since 2019, because 2019 I was playing in Holland still. So I had the whole season, and then I went with the national team, so I was pretty ready. But since 2019, I moved to Canada, so I don't have the same, like, I would say, level of a competition here to feel prepared. Um, Obviously COVID happened too, so between 2019 and last year 2021 we didn't really have anything going on anyways, like everything got canceled and everything, so that was a bit hard, but that was like for everybody, right? But being here and not playing for 2 years, last year I had to like prepare the best I could, and so I would think about like, what can I control, and I would try to control this and be like, I know I can physically be prepared. And I know that my speed, for example, is one of my assets. So I wanted to keep that and be like, if I can utilize that and I can still like be, fast on the field, I think that should be okay, even though I haven't seen pitching that much, I haven't seen like that many at bats, but I was just, telling myself from my experience and like I've played for so many years. Like I think that if physically I'm good and ready to go, like it shouldn't be that much of an adjustment once I get to training camp. And it's kind of the same thing this year because I played last year. And I actually did pretty well considering that I didn't really practice or play for 2 years. So I'm kind of going with the same mindset, thinking that I've done everything I could in terms of like being physically prepared. I try to like train my mind also as much as I could, doing some like imagery and imagining like what the pictures are going to be like, all of that. And also playing a little bit in the league here, even though with the work it's been a bit hard to actually attend the games as much as I wanted. But I've had a bit of that, and I mean, there's so much I can control. And at the end of the day, like this is the best I could do, right? There's the reality of it too. Like I now like I work for almost like full time. So it's hard to like find the time to do all of that. But I'm physically ready. Like I've done everything I could. So that's kind of like the mindset that I have. Like I can only control those. And I cannot make up, like I cannot like magically just make appear like a full team to like practice with, or like, you know what I mean? Like that's just not gonna happen. So I think it's just a matter of like controlling what you can control and being ready with like what you have and what you can, right? And that's just giving me the confidence that, okay, I've done everything I could. If I get there and there's stuff that don't work, I can always adjust. But I think that mentally, if I'm in a good space, like if I'm in a good place mentally, it'll be fun, right? So that's why I'm trying to do everything I could beforehand to get me to that headspace when I get to the competition. If that makes sense. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's like when you get to the competition, that's not the time to be thinking about, okay, what does my technique look like? Do I have, if I'm mentally ready, it's all before. And I really like that lesson that you said of there's only so much you can control. Like you can't control the pitch, you can't control who's pitching, you can't control, the other things outside of that. So I definitely think that's a really good lesson there. I want to jump into, and I just noticed your shirt as you're like, yes, I love it. Talk a little bit about how did you find Rise, and what was kind of your why for applying to be a coach and joining?
Yeah, so over the Christmas break when I went back to France, I think I saw it on social media, I think Instagram. So like I think I was actually following Rise for a while. But then I saw like one of the posts saying that they were looking for new coaches to come on like on board essentially. So I thought like, I mean, why not, right? Like the worst thing that can happen is just that they would say no. And what does that change, right? So I just thought like it would be so cool because I'm coaching. So I also do strength and conditioning. So I do coach some softball athletes in the gym, in the varsity gym. But I also wanted to, just like talk about like the mental aspect of the game, because I just found it, especially in my sport. I know like all the sports, like it does matter as well, but I've heard my whole life that it's like, like softball is like whatever people say, like 30% physical, 70% mental, something like that, right? It's always like a saying. I mean, you can make up those numbers, they don't really matter, but it's just saying that basically it's not that much of a physical sport, It's like you do have like physical abilities, but mentally, if you're not confident, if you're not prepared and get to your at bat, like you're not going to be successful, no matter how strong you are, how fast you are, right? So it's such like a mindset that you have to have. And I thought like we just never had that like growing up, and I've always like heard that that is so important. I'm like, where are the tools though, like, what are you, like, nobody's providing anything. And we started doing mental training with the national team back in 2019, and we actually placed the best we've ever placed with the women's. And it's like, you know, I mean, is it, you know, it's hard to tell if it's related, but I truly believe that it is, because we try to like change our mindset and really, you know, focus on that, and it did help anyways. So, you know, I really saw the value in it, and yeah, just wanted to, like, you know, if I could do that with like younger players, because I think that's when you should start, like the younger you started, the better, right? Because you have to practice those skills. So, and it takes like, you know, might take like a lot of time to like actually master them. So I just thought, like, you know, like youth, like softball would be perfect to like kind of talk about that, and like starting like mentoring those players to get better when they get to like college, to already have those tools.
Yes. And you're, I think, our first softball coach, like softball mind power coach on
Yeah, I
Rise,
think
which is
so.
so awesome.
Mhm.
The last thing I want to ask, and you've given so many great lessons and pieces, but if you were to kind of leave our audience with anything, what would that be? Like, do you have a piece of advice or anything?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say, I mean, I would say I think you can achieve anything, you know, if you put your mind into it. And I know, like, you know, when I was growing up in France, and I, like, people were telling me like, oh, you can go play in the States, and I was like, I mean, sorry, what? You know, it was just like, I was like, there's no way, like, what are you talking about? But it did happen, right? So I kept that goal in mind, like when I was young, and I just like kept like working at it, right? For so many years. And even though I didn't know how it would happen, like I had no idea, like what were the steps, like how do I get there? I had no idea. Like honestly, I had no idea. But I did figure it out apparently, right? I still
Yeah,
got there
you made it.
somehow. So I think, you know, it's just like work towards like your goals, and like if you really like truly believe in something, like it will happen, and you'll figure it out, you'll make it happen, right? And yeah, I think like hard work also beats talent. You know, like you have to kind of like work at your stuff, and not just like rely on like what you can do and like what you know, um like what to do, right? Like if there's something that you find like some weakness in your game, right? Like work on it, and it should be like one of your goals too. Like if mentally you have some goals to like get better and just like get stronger and be more confident, like work on it. It's not just gonna happen overnight, but it's something that can happen with work, right? And so I think it's just always good to like set goals and like crush them.
Thank you so much, Eloise, for sharing that advice at the end there. And I'm so excited and grateful again to have all of these conversations. To learn more about Rise Athletes, and if you want to coach with Eloise, visit rise-athletes.com. Click on either Mind Power, which will give you a little bit more information about our Mind Power program, or coaches. And you can see all the coaches and learn more about them through a quick bio. And go out there and make it a great week. Thanks, everyone.